Hi, this is Noah Flynn, and this week we are covering the topic of art, architecture, and cultural criticism within the Arab world. The focus of this presentation will be on the geometric patterns that are characteristic of Arabic architecture. Before moving on, though, I believe it is also necessary to emphasize that geometric patterns were popular in Islamic architecture, inside and outside what is considered the Arabic world, and that they even existed in late antiquity among the Greeks, Romans, and Sasanians in Iran. However, use of geometric patterns did not reach a pinnacle until its introduction by Arab nations. The overall goal of this presentation is to cover how this pinnacle of architectural design was achieved. First, we will start off with an introduction to geometric patterns, where we will cover their importance in the Arab world, how they were used, and then later on go over and analyze some of these patterns at the level their craftsmen would have, before going over some specific examples of Arabic architecture that employ geometric patterns. This leads us to our first point. Why should any effort be made in studying geometric patterns in the first place? To begin with, geometric patterns are one of the three main styles of decoration utilized in Arabic art and architecture, along with calligraphy and vegetal patterns, which are patterns pertaining of or relating to plants. With regards to geometric patterns specifically, intricate forms of simple shapes were commonly construed and interlaced into complex patterns. These patterns obeyed the mathematical laws and order they were based upon, while granting craftsmen the flexibility intrinsic to artistic freedom of design. By understanding the ubiquitous presence of geometry, we may uncover new insights into Arabic culture. If none of those reasons sound good enough to you, then also consider the fact that tourism and media globalization have stimulated interest in both Arabic architectural designs and the culture behind them as well. Now on to the basis of these geometric patterns. The four basic units include circles and interlaced circles, squares and other four-sided polygons, multi-sided polygons, and stars, which themselves are derived from squares and triangles inscribed in a circle. These basic units are then conjoined into complex tessellations. What is a tessellation exactly? The definition of a tessellation with respect to architecture is the tiling of a surface using one or more geometric shapes, or tiles in this case, that results in no overlaps and no gaps upon the surface. Tessellations were commonly used in the art and architecture of Egyptians, Persians, Romans, Greeks, Byzantines, Arabs, Japanese, Chinese, and the Moors. An instance of this within the Arab world is zellige, which is a handmade natural clay tile that is characteristic of Moroccan architecture and often employed in their craftsmen of tessellations. The general style of tessellational-based design most attributed to Arabic art and architecture are girih tiles. Girih outlines were drafted using only a compass and a straight edge. The basic units of girih are the decagon, the pentagon, the hexagon, the rhombus, and the shape informally referred to as the bow tie. For the purpose of this presentation, the shapes have been color-coded as seen in the picture to the right. The faint red lines differentiate other girih tiles that have not been highlighted by their respective colors. The blue lines are differentiating between Penrose tiles, different combinations of which make up each individual girih tile. Penrose tiles give another layer of complexity to girih tiles that is beyond the scope of this presentation. However, I encourage you to look into them further if this presentation has at all appealed to you. Now back to the girih tiles. These specific shapes allowed for more complex tessellations than had been seen in past architectural forms, which while still being able to be constructed over large surfaces. So why are more complex tessellations now possible? Well, large-scale patterns are made possible because the edges on each shape have the same length, allowing different combinations to be aligned without overlap or the creation of gaps. Furthermore, all edges are intersected at their midpoint by two decorating lines, ensuring that the lines continue across the edges from tile to tile. This second point may seem confusing right now, but I'll reference it again in a later example that may clarify what is being meant here. The combination of these two factors allows for non-periodic tiling, whereas previous use of tessellations was limited solely to periodic tiling. This is a key feature involving girih tiles, as periodic tiling is inherently limited to simple designs relative to what can be achieved through non-periodic tiling. Exploring this distinction further, periodic tiling is mostly limited to repetitive sequences of triangles, squares, and/or hexagons. So, simple tiling designs you might find in most buildings. Both types of tiling can theoretically extend into infinity, but non-periodic tiling is dynamic in that the patterns could continuously morph or change into new forms without causing overlap or gaps and still fitting in within the definition of a tessellation. Moving on, we will look at some examples of girih tile analysis. These are images of the arch in the Abbasid al-Mustansiriya Madrasa in Baghdad, Iraq, which dates back to between 1227 and 1234 AD. When applying girih analysis, only 11 defects are found among a total of 3,700 tiles. The blue decorating lines I mentioned a few slides earlier can also be seen here. Again, notice how each edge on each girih tile is intersected at its midpoint by exactly 2 of these lines. These decorating lines constrain multiple tiles against each other, and also constrains the ability for a craftsman to insert additional tiles. If the additional tile would break any of the constraints introduced by these lines, it would break the non-periodic tessellation and therefore not be allowed in the final draft of the design. Here we have the cover of a Mamluk copy of the Quran that dates back to the early 14th century. Again, notice that the edges of every tile are the same length and intersected twice at their midpoint. Lastly, here is a decorated arch in the Sultan's Lodge of the Ottoman era Green Mosque in Bursa, Turkey, which was completed in 1424 AD. Again, you can see here that both main points still hold true. As a case study, let's quickly examine the Damascus room, a representation of what was thought to be the design behind the residential reception chamber typical of the late Ottoman Empire in Damascus, Syria. Along the floor are several instances of small-scale geometric patterning. The window itself follows vegetal patterning, but displays how the different components of Arab architectural design may be incorporated within one piece, which is our room here. Now we will cover the origins of geometric patterns as pertains to their influence both past and present. As mentioned previously, the practice of geometric design wasn't exclusive to the Arabic world. However, geometric ornamentation did not reach its zenith until its appropriation by the Arabic world. The question then becomes, what made the Arabic interpretation different, more advanced, and aesthetically pleasing? The answer lies in the Topkapi scroll. The scroll's namesake comes from the location it was found at, the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul, Turkey, and its origination is believed to date back as far as the late 15th century. At approximately 29.5 meters in length, the scroll contains a grid system of color-coded 2- and 3-dimensional geometric patterns and is thought to have served as a design repository for Arabic craftsmen. In addition, the 5 primary girih tiles were found to make up the scroll's blueprints. Using the Topkapi scroll as a design reference, the artisans and craftsmen who had access to it could then construct highly complex tile work without needing a full understanding of the mathematical background and underlying principles that resulted in the development of the girih tiles. Below you can see a sequential girih analysis of the Topkapi scroll. Lastly, we shall take a brief look from the perspective of religion. More specifically, I chose the Islamic perspective. As a disclaimer, not all Arabs practice Islam and not all who practice Islam are Arab. I chose this perspective because a large chunk of the Arab populace engage in Islamic practice, and that is the sole reason. As such, geometric patterns in Islamic architecture and ornamentation were used as much for spiritual as for artistic reasons. British historian Robert Irwin suggests that the use of geometric patterns as exteriorized representations of abstract, even mystical thought. A statement that contrasts the order and unity governing geometrical thought and its potential to create an infinite, non-repeating pattern that still manages to harmonize with surrounding architecture, and metaphorically showing how such patterns can be found all around us if we look deep enough. In conclusion, I hope you enjoyed watching this presentation as much as I did in making it. For further reading, I recommend researching Penrose tiles, the even more complex role that they fulfill in all of this.